and welcome to another edition of the Happy Scientist podcast. Today, we are live again on Bitesize Bio. This is the place to be if you want to become a happier, healthier, and more productive scientist. I am Nick Oswald, the founder of BitesizeBio.com, and today we will be drawing again on the immense wisdom of Mr. Kenneth Vogt. Ken is my friend and mentor. He's the Bitesize Bio team's Yoda, and he's the founder of the executive coaching company Vera Claritas. Today, and in all other Happy Scientist podcast episodes, you get to benefit from his words of wisdom to help you increase your performance, enjoyment, and success in the lab. Today, we bring you the second in a three-part live series called Jumpstarting Your Career as a Happy Scientist. And in this installment, we'll be discussing something that is very applicable in the lab, the difference between efficiency and optimization. Since this is a live session, we can take your questions and discuss them as part of the show. You can enter those questions using the questions box that should be visible to the left of or below the presentation window. Also, be sure to check out our downloads page where you can find lots of downloadable goodies and that competition again to win a very rare Happy Scientist t-shirt. The downloads page link is right below the questions box. Okay, without further ado, let's bring in the man, the Yoda himself. Ken, how are you doing today?
Doing great. I just realized the Happy Scientist t-shirt is so rare that I don't even have one.
You don't have one. I don't have one either.
Well, today we're going to talk about the difference between efficiency and optimization. And I know at first blush you might look at that and go, those are synonyms, but they're really not. They're really quite different. And so we're gonna dive into what the difference of it is and why one is far more important than the other, and why you should care about this at all. But before we do all that, let's go to the next slide, and I want to issue a warning right from the beginning. This is not about how to be a proper control freak. And we've had an episode on that topic itself before, so I won't go into great detail on that. But yeah, it was entitled the Siren Song of Control, so you can go back and check that out. But the point isn't here isn't for you to just be in control of every little detail so that things can be efficient or more optimized. That's not it. It's in control won't help you be more efficient and won't help you be more optimized. So right now, even if you're clinging to that, give up on it. It's not what this is going to be about today. We're going to talk about how you can get the most out of your activities and out of your lab's activities. It's not necessarily just about you personally. It could be about anything that you have charge of. So there's a lot to look at here. And a lot of people stop at the point of being efficient. And that's an improvement over not being efficient. But, well, let's go to the next slide. This is something that's been popping up, I believe, in the STEM fields. And I was pondering that from the standpoint of, well, which part of the STEM fields are having the worst time of this? And I think actually science is having the best time. You go to the other end of the spectrum, to mathematics. Oh man, I remember hearing a term from a mathematician friend of mine when he talked about a proof being elegant. And I thought, wow, that's a beautiful word for this. And in math, who thought there'd be anything beautiful? But he was all about it being efficient. What's the shortest number of steps to get from your hypothesis to your conclusion? That was all that mattered. Was how fast could you make it happen? And that's a real limitation. And it's interesting too, and now I'll reference what will be a future episode. In the STEM fields of mathematicians, of my very unscientific population, I don't know any women who are mathematicians. I'm not saying there aren't any, but they are predominantly men. And I know a lot of engineers, that's my background, and they are definitely mostly male. And a lot of technologists are mostly male, but scientists seem to be a little different. I actually know quite a few female scientists, and I don't know, Nick, you probably have a better feel for that than me. What do you think about women versus men in STEM fields?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I don't really have, certainly all of the engineers I've ever worked with are men. There are, but there are quite a lot of women in that I've worked with in science. But as regards to proportion, I would not like to hazard a guess, but it's not enough probably.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because, there's obviously a different approach between the feminine approach and the masculine approach. In efficiency tends toward a masculine outlook, and it's got limitations, and that's hard for the men of us out there to admit that there's limitations in efficiency, and women are going to more lean toward optimization, as we discuss what these things are, but this is for everybody. Everybody can do this, so don't feel like you're typecast. So if we start off and we move to the next slide, the question is, what is efficiency? What exactly are we talking about here? So on the next slide, we will see exactly what it's about. It's about time. It's all about time. It's whether it's clock time or calendar time. It's how fast can you get something done? And if you can do it faster, you're being more efficient. That is the outlook. And okay, getting something done faster, is that a bad thing? Well, no, not at all. In fact, it's a very, very good outcome in most cases. But the problem is, if we go to the next slide, is faster automatically better? Well, and the answer is no, because if it's just faster at the expense of other things that are also important, then that's not so great. And if we think of some examples like that, we've all had situations where we've had fast food. Is fast food the best cuisine you've ever had? Now, I realize some of y'all love your Big Macs and Whoppers, but nobody is looking at that going, yeah, that's the best hamburger I've ever had in my life. It's just not. Now, it's great that you got it quick, and boy, oh boy, in 60 seconds you can go from no hamburger to hamburger. That's fantastic. But it is not the full answer if you really care about, I want to eat well, I want to eat healthy, I want to eat food I enjoy. I mean, you can come up with all kinds of other ways that you might want to look at it. So another thing that is a problem with things being faster is it sets us on this path that we mostly don't want to be on. So let's go to the next slide. And that is being busy. And now I know we have people that'll hear this all over the world, but a big part of the audience here is American. And this is terribly true in America. We are proud of being busy. We brag about how busy we are. And that is true to a certain extent in other areas too, but it's really an epidemic here in the United States. And if somebody says, hey, how you doing? What is our typical answer? Our typical answer is to tell them how busy we are. Oh man, I'm slammed. I've got so much going on. Da, 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 da. We can't wait to tell people how busy we are. And how often have you felt like you had to excuse the fact you weren't busy? Oh, well, I've been meaning to ramp up on this other project, or, well, I just had a little downtime while I'm getting prepared for this. Busyness is overrated. It's not that great. And all of this attitude about busyness has made us focus on efficiency. We've cared about time a whole lot because of this attitude of busyness. But if we move on to the next slide, the fact is time is only a single measure. There are lots of measurable things out there that matter, things that we care about. And you don't even have to search that hard for that. I don't think most of us would say that the only thing that matters is that something is fast. And you're involved in operations and procedures in your lab that in many cases are very complicated or could be very expensive. And of course, efficiency is going to matter, but it won't be the only thing that matters. There's always other things that that we could be looking at. So let's move to the next slide. The problem with efficiency then is it has blind spots. It misses out on all of these other things that might matter in whatever your process is, whatever your operation is, whatever it is that you're working on. And it'll be up to you to define what those things are. Now, this whole notion of efficiency versus optimization is covered very well in an interesting book I read at least 30 years ago. And it's called The Goal. It's by Eliyahu Goldratt. The Goal, 2 words. And it's funny, it was a business book. It was about this notion of efficiency versus optimization for a manufacturing company. And what made the book really interesting was it wasn't written like a typical business book. It's a novel. I mean, an actual novel. It's a story with characters, but it's a business book. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, yeah, that's great. I'm not in business, I'm in the lab. But something that we've talked about over and over again in this podcast is that we want to borrow best practices from other industries and other areas. And this is definitely one of them. You know, manufacturing is not the only place that can make use of optimization. It's also true in finance, and it's certainly true in the lab. Optimization gives you all kinds of new opportunities. So let's hit the next slide. So the point is, what is optimization? Here we are. We've talked about efficiency. And okay, efficiency is about, let's call it optimized time. That's great. So for the next slide, then, we'll look at the idea of what do we want to optimize? You can decide. You can choose what is good, what it is that matters to you in a certain setting. Time may well be one of them, and there's nothing wrong with time as one of your choices. But what are your other options of things you might care about? Let's go to the next slide. So on top of something being faster, you might like your process, your operation to require less material. Maybe it could use less equipment because equipment is expensive and usage of equipment is expensive. How about less personnel? What if it took less space or required less funding? Or, this is an interesting one, what if you needed less managerial approval? Would that make your process a little easier? Where you don't have to go get say-so from somebody? These are just some ideas of things that might matter to you when it comes to optimization. You could take any process you want and decide, you know what, I'm going to look at this process purely from the standpoint is how can I avoid having to talk to the boss? Awesome. Or how can I use less expensive equipment? How can I take up less lab space? How can I do this with less money? Whatever it is that matters to you, you have a way of then looking at that. And you'll notice the word less keeps showing up there because generally that's what it's talking about. To optimize something means to use less of something. And of course, faster means less time. But everything here is how can I be more efficient with something other than time? And that's where optimization comes in. And this list is not necessarily everything. You're going to look at things and see other possibilities.
But one thing I notice about that list, Ken, is that it's all business side, if you like, as in it's not personal. And for me, it's quite interesting. I didn't know exactly what you were going to say here, and you just unpacked a whole lot of stuff that I'd forgotten about, that I went through a whole efficiency drive myself at one point in the lab. And you know, it's about a lot of the times during the day in the lab, you're managing yourself. And so most of the time, actually, when you're doing the actual work, it's about managing yourself and your own time and so on. And that idea of efficiency being just about optimizing the time, that really rings true for me, where you're you're trying to drive more results, if you like, from within per unit of time. One of the big costs here in that, not material or equipment or personnel, but a personal cost is stress, and that then reduces your efficiency. So you max out. That's what I found out. You max out at a level of time-based efficiency that you can reach, and then it starts to become diminishing returns. So maybe another set of measures you could look at here are personal ones. How can I do this with less stress? How can I get the same results with less stress? How can I get the same results with more time for reflection and so on, which will then improve the overall result as well. That's what I found in my efficiency drive. Was I didn't leave myself time to just really look at what was happening in the result, what my results were telling me and things like that. It was just barreling from one experiment to the next without taking proper time to step back and really look at the bigger picture and things like that.
I like it. So move to the next slide and we'll talk about that in a little more detail. The point here is, what are your objectives? And I like this point of what are your personal objectives here? How do I make this process easier for me? And I don't just mean easier like you're being lazy, but I mean like if you have a process that's just demanding your constant attention, maybe you need to have a way to be able to have some relief for your attention at certain intervals. Maybe you need to have certain things set up in such a way that they don't need your hawk eye on it the whole time. Maybe you need to have your process have less physical steps for you. So that, literally, you might be wearing yourself out physically. And sometimes you might think this is funny. You think, man, I practically sit at a desk all day, or I sit at a bench all day. I'm not really working that hard, but you find yourself at the end of the day exhausted, and you forget how much physical stuff you actually are doing. Then there's the other side of that, is how much of you is wore out physically because of the mental exertion. And is there a way that you can reduce the requirement for mental exertion in this process? So, you can decide what kind of objectives you have. There's no requirement here. You can make it as optimized as you want in any way you want. And you don't have to really explain that to others, other than, are you getting the result? And that was another thing you mentioned there a moment ago, Lynn, or Nick, that your result really matters. That's how you determine what to optimize. By, okay, what do I need to optimize so as to get the result I'm after? Whereas efficiency might not get you the result you're after, or at least may not be as strong a factor in it as you might automatically think.
That's an interesting point. So you're looking to get more results per unit time, which is or more meaningful results. Let's say more insight per unit time. You can take it to that.
Or whatever unit you want to have. And in fact, we go to the next slide. This is another important point about this. We're talking about something you can measure. You have to decide what's good and find a way to put a number to it. And I hope anybody in the STEM field is going to be happy to see numbers. Numbers matter. Numbers are way we regulate things, how we tell whether something is good or bad, or whether we're moving forward or moving backward. And we've all had the situation where we've had a feeling about a number. You see a number and you're disappointed, or you see a number and you're excited. Numbers can be way more than just a cold set of arithmetic. They can generate a feeling. They can generate an emotion, and ultimately, when it comes to your objectives, you're going to have an emotional feeling about that. We feel good when we accomplish something and we get to where we're going, and we feel good when we get answers. Because I realize in science you have the unusual field of often you don't get the result you were looking for. But what was important was you got a result.
Mhm.
That was the thing that mattered to you more than anything else. So, this is a constant learning curve.
So there's a kind of not a limitation, but there's another pressure here, or in science, other than what you think is good. You might think, I would really like to do X number of experiments in a week, or I would like to, uncover the answer to this question by, sometime in this quarter or something. But you have, the overall pressure in science, the overall measurement is the whole publish or perish thing. To get more funding, you need to publish. To get published, you need to get results that mean something. To get results that need something, you need to get more results, right? And then that pressure is ingrained into the whole culture of science. So you have peers and superiors who are pushing you to get more results, essentially, to do more, and then culture of business, and obviously it'll vary lab to lab, but that's a general statement of what the stress is, and it's not just in science; it's everywhere. But so. I guess some people listening to this will be thinking, what does it matter what I think? What does it matter what I define as good? If I'm being pressured from the outside to deliver a metric or to deliver a result, essentially, and a paper or whatever, by the end of the year, it must be there or not. So it all has to be a big panic. What would you say about people who feel that their measurement doesn't matter? It's what the sort of prevailing wind is from their
it's
culture.
still your measurement of what it's going to take to get that result you want, because that result will make you happy. That satisfying management, getting the paper published on time, that is going to be part of what will make you happy. So, I mean, I understand that sometimes we wish we could just, I would just like to head down this rabbit hole because I just find that really, really interesting. But nobody wants to pay me to do that. It's like, all right, that's fine. You are here as a job, though. It's a career. You're going to have to do something to earn your pay, and you can get satisfaction from that. And maybe sometimes you get to go down the rabbit hole. Maybe sometimes you don't. And maybe you won't go down those rabbit holes anytime soon. Maybe that's something you'll do after you retire, or something you'll just decide, nope, that's just not as important to me as some other things. You got to choose. Now, if there's just a burning need, you just have to go there. Well, then you got to really reassess your career. How do I align my career with this kind of focus? So that I can do that. Because at the end of the day, often we're looking at this going, man, I'm not allowed to do this. Yeah. It's not you're not allowed to do it in science. You're not allowed to do it at this particular job. So, you have to weigh how important is it to you versus how important is it that you keep this particular position.
So I guess that this is a fairly hot topic, and for the people who are listening, if you have any views or questions about that, please put them into the questions box there, and we can deal with them towards the end. We will bring your views and questions into the discussion towards the end.
Definitely. My personal background is software engineering, and I promise you, I have seen so many exciting things that I really wanted to personally develop, but I made some choices in my career, and those things remain undeveloped by me. And in some cases, other people developed them, and I didn't. And some of those people are very wealthy these days. I mean, I could look back at all that with regret, but I don't, because I think about something that Ray Dalio said. He said, you can have anything in life that you want, but you can't have everything. And I found that to be true. Yes, you can have anything you want. The problem is you're not willing to give up other things to have it. That's why people hear that and they push it away because, well, I can't have anything. Yeah, you can. You can have anything if you're willing to forego other things. You want freedom? Yeah, you're gonna have to forego having a family. You want to have, you want to live a thrill seeker life? Well, then you're gonna have to take some risks. There's there's a price to pay for certain paths. So, you just have to decide. So now, assuming you've made your choices here and you figured out what you're going to do, and you do want, and you see what matters and what you want to be more efficient about, what's the first thing you're going to encounter when you start to implement? Let's hit the next slide there. You're going to come in and you're going to come upon bottlenecks. And this is a normal part of a process. There's going to be things that you're doing various steps, and it wasn't hard to get this together, and it wasn't hard to get somebody to do that. And all of a sudden you get to this and it's a problem every time. It's, for whatever reason, it takes a long time, or it's expensive, or it requires all these people, or it needs approval, or whatever other measure that you've got there, it's hard to meet that measure. Those are the areas that we'll call bottlenecks. And when it comes to a bottleneck, that is where you need to put your focus. You might be looking at, man, I was so concerned about being efficient about other things, other parts of this, that didn't give enough attention to this. And that's what everything's got to build around. You gotta make bottlenecks your prima donnas. They get all the attention. If this is the part of the process where things bog down every time, this is the part of the process you want to build everything toward. Is there anything I can do at steps before this to make this part of the process easier? Is there anything I can do to be better prepared for this part of the process? Is there anything I can do to make it faster, to make it less expensive, to require less resources, whatever? Focus on your bottlenecks and engineer everything around them. Make sure that that's where you put all of your energy, and it'll be worthwhile, because at the end of the day, you're going to see other parts where you feel like, this part's easy and it seems like we're wasting time there. It seems like it's, this part's too, it happens too leisurely, and then this other part is this mad struggle. Well, focus on the part that's the mad struggle, and don't worry so much about those other parts. So if we go to the next slide, this opens up another thing, that question that may pop up into your mind. Am I allowed to not focus on that part that seems all leisurely? Yes, if your focus is on the whole. If you're focused on the whole, and then you see the whole process. We've all heard the phrase of, you can't see the forest for the trees. Stop looking at individual trees for a moment, at least, and look at the whole forest. Make sure you see the whole thing, see the whole process. Does the whole process make sense? Because if you put all your attention into how to make step number 3 super optimized, you may realize I put all this energy and effort into that, and it really didn't affect the whole that much, because it wasn't all that important. So, make sure you take that moment to step back and observe the whole. Now, as you do that, you're going to see different phases of your process look different. Some of them look frenetic, and some of them look very leisurely, and some of them look demanding, and some of them look like they aren't that important, and some look simple and some look complex. But this way you get to see it. Now, when you see something that's simple or leisurely, or it doesn't seem to take much, you might look down on that. You might think, wow, there's something wrong here. And if we hit the next slide, you might see that part of the process and think that I'm losing efficiency there. It's not, there's too much idleness going on at this simple step. But you know what? You get to have moments of idleness. In fact, you should have moments of idleness, and you need to make use of them. And Nick, you were alluding to this earlier. You need to have contemplation time. You need to have time in the midst of doing things where you're not running with your hair on fire, because that's when you're going to see things. That's when you're going to get new ideas. That's when you're going to have an opportunity to act on your hunches. and use your intuition and even notice your intuition. Because when you're super busy or you're super engaged, sometimes it's hard to see that stuff. And so we want you to make use of that idle time and not look at it like it's a flaw, because it's not a flaw. Any process should have some slow spots and should have some openness in it. And if you've got no openness and no slow time, you need to look at your process again. It's not optimized. What's happening there is you've made it efficient. Well, you've made it efficient at a great cost. You will find out when you start looking at it through the terms of optimization. When you start looking at other measures, you'll realize all I did was make this fast. And that's not going to be a good thing.
I think that this is a good point, is that, you know, I've written a question down here myself. What is the most efficient way to do science? And I don't just mean time-wise. Or what is the optimal way to do science, let's say, in the language you're using here? And again, it's, you know, you need to let it ebb and flow. You need to treat your brain as like an athlete would treat their muscles, if you like. You know, if they're a sprinter, they're whatever, you need lots more than your leg muscles to sprint, but you know what I mean? They would never work them hard all the time. You have to let it come in and out so that you don't just burn yourself out. You also need to do the old sharpen the saw thing, where you stop, you don't just go headlong into doing experiment after experiment, or, you know, be busy all the time. You step back and look at how you're doing the experiments, or look at what, you know, maybe you need to go and do a course on microscopy and learn how to use the microscope better, and that'll get you more efficient. Or, you know, there's all sorts of different angles, but I do think that again, at least in my experience, the prevailing wind is get in the lab, spend long hours in the lab, you know, bashing away. But again, you find yourself sometimes doing the, you know, the same thing over and over again. You know, this experiment didn't work, I'll just try it again. Keep going, and try it again and again. But you're getting nowhere if you step back and figure out where it's going wrong, or figure out if there's a different way, or figure out whether you need more training, or, you know, just to put some specifics on it. Then, you know, that's a way to optimize, rather than trying to be more time efficient to allow you to jam more experiments into the day.
Right. And now it's built into your process to have that time to actually do that kind of assessment.
Exactly. It's really underrated. I think I wrote a Bitesize article about it many years ago, but about just sit down and just don't feel, try not to feel pressured by the whole you need results thing. Sit down and just allow yourself time to not do anything in particular, because sometimes that is when your best ideas come. But allow yourself, you know, ask yourself questions like, is there a better way, you know, to do that? Can I research a better technique? Can I get some training? You know, do I need a rest? You know, stuff like that. To treat yourself with respect, treat your brain with respect. You treat your drive with respect. Don't burn it all on a mad rush to get a mythical number of set of results that, you know, might not be obtainable by the sheer brute force approach that you're maybe employing, if you're like me. or like I was. We used to have a thing. We used to have or I used to do in the lab, where I was so proud that I would use of the idea that, you know, this was in the early 2000s when multitasking was the thing. And
get an episode on that too.
There is, yeah. And you get often in protocols, there's like short centrifugation steps. You load your tubes up in the centrifuge, turn it on, wait 2 minutes or something like that. So I used to have a stack of papers, you know, like scientific papers, that I would read while the centrifuge was on. I thought this was great use of time. It's not, because the switching cost is so high of switching from focusing on the experiment to focusing on the paper to switching to focusing back again on the experiment. And you leave yourself no gaps to just realize what you're doing, or, you know, think about other, you know, just let ideas drift in, or whatever. that it was the worst idea ever. But lots of us in the lab I was in were quite enamored by the idea of just forcing more doing into each hour. That a lot of us got caught up in that thing. Wasn't fun.
Yeah, you put yourself in the centrifuge.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. That's what it felt like after a while.
Yeah. All right, so then let's move to the next slide, and we'll take another approach at this also. We've talked about idleness, but things do have to happen. And so there is a certain amount of throughput that has to happen step by step. So, obviously you got to put your attention there, and you got to think of it in terms of flow. How do I keep this moving? And that was a perfect example of that. Centrifuge time would be the perfect idle moment to consider your throughput. How do I make things flow a little better in this process? And, you might be doing things that are literally growing. That's a peculiar and wonderful part of life science that a lot of other people in STEM don't get to touch. There's nothing is growing in software engineering other than data. But you're growing plants, you're growing cultures, you're doing things with something that's alive, and it's got its own thing going on. And so if you can dovetail with that, and you can see parts of your process that are using that natural energy, and you can engage it, that's just an amazing thing. I mean, I'm jealous of what y'all get to do, and it's amazing to watch the miracle of it at the same time too. I mean, I go back to just high school science class and watching cells multiply under a microscope, and it just blew my mind. And you do that, times 1,000 every day. So, make sure you're paying attention to that. It's all part of what you're doing. And part of it is the living thing that you're creating. When to push the analogy a bit, you're building something here that is taking on a certain kind of energy, because you're putting energy into it, and something is going to come out the other side. So, if you make good use of that power, then you will find you will get more efficient.
It's interesting. It's interesting. It comes back to similar, everything comes back to kind of similar fundamentals. A big part of what you're talking about there is just appreciating what you're doing, and that's slowing down slightly. You don't slow down 1%, just enough to let some air in so that you can, or let some light in so that you can appreciate what you're doing.
That was a very important point here. I'm not telling you to just shut down everything. This idea of you can slow down 1%, it can make all the difference.
It's a good psychological trick in a way. I do that when I'm running. Is like I'm feeling like I'm getting tired, right? I'll slow down 1%, and you didn't really slow down. You just gave yourself the space to, it's almost your mind that slows down rather than anything else.
Right.
You don't lose anything really by doing a 1%. It's a good little exercise.
And of course, all this, it's just like what you're talking about there. You're comparing it to another part of life. Once you've learned something, you've figured out a pattern that works, you can apply it anywhere, anywhere in your life. And by the way, things you've learned in other parts of your life, by all means, bring them into your career, bring them into your work in the lab. And that's why I've also talked about how if we see things in other industries and other areas of knowledge, bring them in if you can. If you find that something's applicable across the board, or at least can cross over into your area, use it. There's a bunch of great ideas that have already not only been thought of, but have been implemented in the world. Well, why should we have to reinvent the wheel all the time? We don't. We can bring them to bear now. So if we go to the next slide, the whole point of all this has been an optimized scientist is a happy scientist. The point of getting optimized is it's going to make you happier as a scientist. You're going to be better at your job when you're happier. You're going to have a more fulfilling career. The rest of your life is going to go better. Everything will flow better. It's this. See what this is? Becoming optimized is an optimizing step. you get optimized by optimizing. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So get yourself engaged in it. Yes, another woman on our screen who's in science and engaged and happy. And we want to see all the women in science happy. We want to see all the men in science happy. Let's all be happy with what we're doing here. It's a wonderful field, and there's a lot of opportunity, and you can have a great life thanks to science. So that about wraps it up for me, Nick, unless you want to add something.
Yeah, well, first of all, now's the time to put your questions in if you have any, or comments on this. I just jotted down this wheel thing of what does optimized science look like? Well, what does an optimized scientist look like? And the points on the wheel are if you're getting things, are you getting things done? Are you resting? Are you contemplating? Giving yourself time to contemplate. Are you giving yourself time to train? Are you giving yourself time to read? Are you managing to get published? Right. And so too often we focus on the getting things done and or publishing via getting things done. And it's only one part of the, so you're off to one side of that wheel, if you like, and you're not attending to the rest. And that sort of map might be a good way to help yourself get back to center. I think we'll put it in a graphic. It might help. It'll be a way for you to help you to get yourself back to center. Am I giving myself enough rest time? No. Okay, well I'm off too far off to one side, so I need to sacrifice some getting things done time for a bit of rest. Am I doing enough reading? No, I need to sacrifice. Or if maybe you're resting too much and you're not doing getting things done time, putting enough getting things done time. That won't make you happy either, because you won't get the result you want. But I can see that being a kind of like just like a map that you could use to figure out where you are and what you need to be doing more of. Right. It's not exhaustive, but obviously.
And if you need some inspiration for that, I can definitely recommend that book I mentioned earlier, The Goal. It'll give you some ideas. You see somebody who had to actually do this in a real working environment, and yet had a life going on at the same time. And he did make some trade-offs like that. He had to make some choices, and he was surprised at some of the places where the choices showed up. So again, check it out yourself. It's a good little side read for somebody. It's not a hard read. It'll also satisfy a certain amount of desire for some light reading because it's in a novel kind of form. So it's a lot easier than reading some of the papers you guys have to read.
Yeah, I think that what we'll do is we'll put that one in the show notes for this episode, which you can find along with all the other episodes at bitesizebio.com/The Happy Scientist. We were trying to figure out what episode number this is, but you can find it. Look for the title of Efficiency versus Optimization, and it's in there. So I have a couple of questions to put to you here. So busyness. Busyness is expected in my lab. How do I overcome that?
Well, so here's the thing. Is it busyness for the sake of just looking good, looking like you're active, or do people actually care whether or not you're doing something worthwhile? If people are just looking for that kind of Lord of the Flies social pressure kind of thing, I would actually argue that don't give into that. That you want to do things that are worthwhile and that matter. Now, there are times you should be busy. There are important things to get done and you want to stay active, and that's fine. but focus more on, are you working toward your optimized goals? And if it's not serving your optimized goal, don't waste your time on it. Don't waste your energy on it. And if somebody were to challenge you on that, point that out. It's like, look, where I'm at a stage right now where I've got a moment that I can focus on, on the bigger picture, and I'm doing it. And yeah, so it doesn't look as active. But in other moments when you're being active, go ahead, broadcast that you're being active.
It's amazing some of the cultures you come across, and not just in science, but in all sorts of jobs and things, and what people think will get them the results they want. Mm-hmm. And I came across one was, don't read anything. You're in my lab, don't read anything unless it's a scientific paper. Like that literally meant don't read books. Don't waste time reading books. Don't waste time reading the news. Don't waste time on anything except scientific papers. And even as a kind of, well, not much more than a teenager at that point, that struck me as, well, that's just going to create a very one-dimensional mind in a way. That if you just switching off and reading something else, sci-fi or watching some nonsense on TV or whatever, sometimes that just allows you the space to think. But yeah, and long hours.
When you're up against somebody who is efficient and not optimized, especially if they're your boss, I mean, I realize you may have to have a little longer conversation with a person like that and point out that, look, I want to make sure I get to our end goal, and I know myself, and I know that if I just go a mile a minute without a break, I won't get it done. I will crack. This is how I keep myself able to keep producing. And if you get to the point where you just can't get that message across to somebody, you may need to find another boss.
Okay, well, what about if the problem is yourself? So we have a question in here. As a woman with an engineering degree who now works in science, it took me a while to set boundaries. Because I could work through lunch and stay a little late to cross more things off my to-do list, I started to burn out. I get your point about using idle time to contemplate the big picture, but it's really hard to resist the desire to squeeze a few more things into each day. Any suggestions?
Yes, well, first off, I want to applaud the fact that you were female with an engineering degree. Power to you, lady. And I think we really need more feminine energy in engineering. I really do. But that aside, here's one of the things I'm hearing from this. Not everybody gets the same kind of juice from crossing something off a to-do list as some other folks. For some folks, it's the highest high there is to be able to cross something off a list. And so they're constantly looking for that. The problem that'll happen there is you get focused on things that you can cross off a list rather than things that are important. And at the end of the day, you got to take a breath and go, is this really important? Yes, I scratched off the list something. Should I feel good about that? Or was it really not that valuable? Did it stand in the way of me getting something more important done? Did I spend all of my time scratching things off the list and not do the thing that mattered the most to me? So one of the things you can start with on that is to, every day, even, I'm not against having lists. It's a useful tool. But every day you look at that list and you look at what's the thing on there I least want to do. Okay, all right, I'm going to do that first. And now maybe you can't do it first. So, well, the thing I least want to do is go to that doctor's appointment. Well, it's scheduled at 2 o'clock. I can't go any earlier than that. But, you make sure that nothing will get in the way of that. And, and when that moment comes, it is absolutely the most important thing. You got to assess things as to their importance and put them in that priority. And stop giving yourself such a pat on the back for accomplishing something that wasn't important. So, we have two kinds of ways to look at things, a task. We can look at it from the standpoint, is it important versus not important? And is it urgent versus not urgent? And we are almost always compelled to do the things that are urgent and not important. And that's the quadrant that's the least valuable. The things that are generating urgency and are not important, how dare they? Why are we allowing that? Whereas what you want to be doing first in your life are the things that are important but not urgent, because there's no driving urgency to make you do it, but the importance is the thing that matters. So, first do the things that are important but not urgent, then do the things that are important and urgent, then do the things that are urgent but not important if you must. And by golly, if you have things on your list that are not urgent and not important, why are they on your list? You're just using it so you can have the thrill of crossing something off your list. Get those off your list. They don't count.
So what was the first quadrant there? The highest priority quadrant?
Would be important but not urgent.
Important but not urgent, right? So say that you only had, this person's list only had important but urgent and important but not urgent things on the list, right? And it wasn't a problem of filling up the day with tasks, with completing tasks for the sake of completing tasks. In that instance, the fact that she's said that she was tempted to do so much that she was burning out, then that's there's another way.
It's important to have some downtime.
Well, that's the thing. You
put that on your list.
Yeah, the only thing to realize is that you're burning. It's like going into your overdraft. There's no point, because you will pay for it the next day, and so it's go. But I guess you say you're setting boundaries, so that maybe you're starting to realize that yourself. But it's that whole thing of, okay, I'm getting things done, but am I resting enough? No. All right, I need to move myself somewhat towards more rest and a bit less getting done. It's otherwise.
So like for instance, might be, I'm going to set 45 minutes for lunch. I'm not going to violate that. All I'm going to do is have lunch during that 45 minutes. And you put it on your calendar. And so what you're doing is you recognize this is important, but it's not urgent. Because, if you don't take 45 minutes for lunch today, the world won't end. But it's important. So you do it. And you make sure that if you didn't do it that way, if you tried to multitask during your lunch and all that, you don't get to cross that off your list. You didn't do it. You did not take time for lunch. So it doesn't count. So don't give yourself the pat on the back that you accomplished it, because you didn't.
It's all about that kind of as well, that that drive is really important, but the drive can be your own worst enemy in a way, if it's too intense, or if it's not fettered in any way.
Right.
Well,
there's another part about that too, is that you weren't born that way. You developed that ability to have drive, and of course you gained a lot from that. It was valuable, it was useful, but understand that wasn't the end. There's still more growth available to you from here. Now learn how to use that drive in a controlled fashion and not have it control you.
Yeah. How can you optimize to get similar levels of output with more rest and recuperation time, for example? Right. One kind of focus. Yeah. Okay. Here's another question. So, do you mean, and this means you can, do you mean I need to get faster or better at doing experiments, and that's all? Okay, so that, I guess we've talked about that. It's not just about, well, the whole point of this is it's not about just getting faster.
Yeah,
I'll let you answer.
My point was, don't only be fast.
Right. Or better. So, and one way to do it would be to get better at doing your experiments. So that would be allowing yourself time for training, optimization of protocols, for example, looking for other alternatives, looking for different tools, different commercially available tools or non-commercially available tools, so that again, that whole sharpen the saw thing. Who was that? Was that Abraham Lincoln? If I had time I have to chop a tree, I'd spend half the time chopping down sharpening the axe first, or whatever, that concept. Okay, 2 more questions, unless any more come in. I guess we've covered this anyway, but what about multitasking? Good or bad? I guess you can direct them to the episode.
Right, yeah, we did a whole episode on multitasking. I would encourage you to listen to it, because it wasn't just my opinion. We're talking about a Stanford study, a really well done study, and they just utterly slayed multitasking. It is bad every possible way you can measure it. Now, I'm saying that right now without backing it up because I'd like you to go back and hear the backup to it. But trust me, multitasking is not the way. And believe me, I had to be taught that. I loved to multitask. Yeah. And I've felt so much better since I finally realized it wasn't working.
Yeah, me too, actually. That was part of the early 2000s had a lot to answer for with that. Multitasking, great thing to do. Okay, one more.
One of the things that came out of some of these questions, I realized for some of you folks out there, you're already operating at, 98%, 99%. You're really, really good at what you do. So yeah, you're probably not going to get massively better with the next little trick, the next little tip here, but that's not the point now. At the high level you're at now, the incremental gains are highly valuable because you're already doing so much that a little bit more of you is really good for the world.
I'm gonna just cast a prediction out that for most people listening to this, the way to go is doing a bit less and recuperating and thinking around what they're doing a bit more, and possibly training a bit more. That would be my straw poll of myself and all the people that I know in science.
Yeah, I think you certainly make a case for that.
Yeah. Okay, one more, which is quite a nice one to end on. What about enjoyment as a measurement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I come to think about the country of Tibet, and they're having a gross national happiness measure, which I just think is fantastic. And yes, absolutely, enjoyment should matter. And I realize for some of you out there, that's really hard. And some of you feel like you don't deserve it. And some of you feel like it's not important enough. I have things to get done. There's critical things going on in the world that I have to address. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. You can enjoy curing cancer. You can, so, and by the way, if you can, please do. So
how about people who think that if you enjoy something, it sort of by definition means, if you focus on enjoying it, it by definition means you won't get the job done? Does that make sense?
I would just point back to the evidence. Is like, can you show me the data on that? Because I think that's baloney.
I think a lot of people think that intuitively is not the right word, because it's a received wisdom.
It's not accurate.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you can enjoy. You can enjoy pipetting in 96 well tube plate rather. Boring if you look at it like that, but. In one way, if you look at it as boring, another way, you can just relax and enjoy,
right?
Anything. You can enjoy doing the dishes, whatever.
It isn't about how you feel about it. It's the story you're telling about it.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
You're telling the story that it's boring. You're telling the story that you hate doing it. Stop telling the story. Just you'll find that you'll enjoy your life more that way.
Yeah, and I think that whole slow down 1% or slightly more if you feel like you can. I think that helps, because you just stops the kind of, I don't know what that is, but it's that sort of driving, almost like a panic feeling that gets in when you feel like, I don't like doing this, and yeah, if you take a step back and just slow down, then exactly. Well, you can certainly practice doing that. I think it takes some practice to get there.
Yeah, and we're not saying that there shouldn't be some pressure in your world. There should be. You're expected to get things accomplished, but whether or not you're stressed about that pressure, that's a different thing. That's something you have a choice about. Don't give in to stress. Recognize pressure when it's there. If it's too much pressure, do something about it. But if it's not, then to realize that you get real satisfaction from working hard and from doing hard things. It's of great value.
Yep. Fantastic. This is a very interesting angle on things. So thank you again, Ken, for another great episode there. I think
Thank you.
that's a lot for people to chew on. Again, you can find this episode, the show notes, and all of the other episodes at bitesizebio.com/The Happy Scientist, all one word. And in there, again, you probably, if you've listened to us before, we always talk about this. Watch episodes 1 to 9. There's some, you might have to listen to them a couple of times because they're quite heavy, but they really give you some foundational principles that I think I would highly recommend to you if whatever stage of your career you're at.
I wouldn't describe them as heavy. I would describe them as meaty.
Okay, you always say that to me.
They are ripe with value.
They are ripe with value, and they're worth really digging into. And then you can also find us at facebook.com/The Happy Scientist Club, all one word. And there you can drop us a line, drop us your questions or whatever you want to do. Invite your friends, invite your neighbors, all that sort of stuff. That just leaves me again to say thanks to you, Ken. Thanks for everyone for joining us. And we'll see you in the next episode, which is next week.
Okay, bye.